Quran 39:6 is another one from a long list claimed by Muslims as a miracle verse. The verse reads, "He created you from a single person, then created of like nature his mate, and he sent down for you 8 head of cattle in pairs." By the way, there are far more than 8, as the Quran does not seem to include many other types of cattle from regions outside of Arabia. Anyway, it is this next part that is relevant to this video. He makes you in the wombs of your mothers in stages one after another, in 3 veils of darkness, such as Allah your Lord and Cherisher, to him belongs dominion, there is no God but he, then how are ye turned away? The term 3 veils of darkness is key here, although the Quran does not explicitly say what the 3 layers of darkness actually are. However, in the Quran Miracles website, it says it refers to the abdominal wall, the uterine wall, and the amniotic sac. Other Islamic articles and videos make similar claims. As previously seen, although the 3 layers of darkness is a vague expression with no indication of what it really refers to, Muslim academics have written about it. In the study called Reinterpretation of the Darkness of 3, it says after having reviewed the miracle claim, they concluded the 3 darkness means the darkness of the abdomen, uterus, and amnion chorion. Incidentally, the amnion chorion as a layer was mentioned by Greek physician Galen, who lived hundreds of years before Islam. He also described 3 layers. Reference to this will be shown later. Here it is also important to note that there were earlier physicians such as Rufus of Ephesus, a man who preceded and influenced Galen himself, and whose works were translated into Arabic, mentioned in this work by the academic Maria Abualhaqq. Nonetheless, due to the Quran's ambiguity, the article says that darkness can also refer to DNA codes. In effect, it could mean a multitude of things, but rather bizarrely, the abstract concludes by saying all of this is compatible scientifically with the Quran. If this is the conclusion, their level of analysis and cognitive bias, then their standard of academia leaves much to be desired. A favourite amongst Muslim apologists is a certain Dr. Keith Moore, mentioned previously in earlier videos. In his book, The Developing Human, 3rd edition with Islamic additions, on page 9, within a small section, he chimes in by saying about Islam's contribution to embryology that the 3 layers probably refers to the maternal anterior abdominal wall, the uterine wall, and the amniochorionic membrane, going on to say space does not permit him to expand on this further. At this point, a question needs to be asked. How could he, and also other modern people, possibly assume that those 3 layers are being referred to, especially when the Quran did not specifically define them? In reality, it is merely their eisegesis to further their own agendas. In the next slide, early classical commentators of the Quran will be looked at to see what they understood by the 3 layers of darkness. After all, These earlier scholars knew the Quran and its language better than modern people ever could. The three layers of darkness, as explained by early Quran commentators such as Tafsir Jalalain, says it means threefold darkness, that is the darkness of the belly, that of the womb, and that of the placenta. This statement is in agreement and congruent with Ibn Abbas as well as Ibn Kathir. Notice it is quite telling that they did not mention what modern apologists say it means. In fact, none of the early classical commentators say it means what the modern apologists are saying what it could mean. This picture, taken from the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases website, shows a side view drawing of a developing baby in the womb. The umbilical cord, placenta, womb, and amniotic fluid are labelled. As defined by the Cambridge Dictionary, the belly is simply the stomach or the front part of the body. So what early Muslim classical scholars seem to be describing as the three layers of darkness was no more than what was known physiologically through observation. The Quran uses the plural word butun. The singular word is batn, which in Arabic, according to a prominent Arabic dictionary, means the belly, abdomen, midriff, though some translators use the more specific word womb. Even so, these were observable parts of the anatomy even back then, so there is nothing miraculous about the term, as is claimed by modern apologists. In fact, there are many more layers than the three, none of which are mentioned by the Quran. Had it done so, it would have been far more impressive and could then perhaps be claimed as a miracle verse. These layers, though not exhaustive, are the corpus luteal layers, endometrium, myometrium, perimetrium. Besides, there is the cervix urethral layers, abdomen with walls, and the abdominal cavity layer, peritoneum and its layers. Then there are the placental layers. One such example is the endothelium. For more information, references can be found in this popular medical textbook from between pages 469 to 478. A question remains as to why the Quran restricted it specifically to only three layers, not one or two, or four or five or more. It may perhaps have something to do with the notion that it was taken from an earlier idea. For example, there already existed the idea of three membranes around the fetus, the amnion, chorion, and allantois. Some of the aforementioned layers are now being claimed by Muslims as what the Quran is referring to, but this idea was taught by the hitherto cited and highly influential Greek physician Galen, mentioned in the source called Embryology with the Physiology of Generation by Dr. Johannes Müller, who is considered to be one of the greatest living physiologists and philosopher of his time, whose book became the leading textbook in physiology for much of the 19th century. In précis, due to its ambiguity and the vague descriptions, the three layers as described in the Quran could simply be a repetition of the embryonic membranes as described by Galen and his predecessors. After all, two of the three layers that were described by Galen are now being claimed by Muslims as a Quranic miracle. So in conclusion, despite the modern apologists' claims, when the classical Islamic sources are looked at, they said the darkness was referring to the belly, the womb, and the placenta. These areas were known by people prior to Islam, and it was based solely on what they can see with their naked eyes, who assumed it's dark inside the body, a simple conclusion deduced by anyone specializing in anatomy at a time unassisted by technological advancement, or anyone who had observed disembowelment. In summation, in spite of the attempts made by modern-day apologists, the Quranic verse is vague and is therefore open to interpretation. It just simply states 3 layers of darkness. When analysed deeply, even this is incorrect, so it did not deliver any new or superior information that was not already known in the 7th century AD. In the next video, this topic will be discussed in more detail by citing a well-known classical Muslim scholar as to his explanation of what he thought the 3 layers of darkness meant and where he got this information from. Once this upcoming video is viewed, it would provide conclusive evidence that the Quran did not bring anything miraculous at all.